is the World According to Zig podcast for May 11th, 2019. My name is John Ziegler. I'm the host of this show where you can still get the truth about the news of the day from a conservative perspective in this world turned upside down. The Trump-related news, as usual, you can get via the Individual One podcast, which I urge you to do particularly this week, because the Individual One podcast, which you can find at our website, freespeechbroadcasting.com, or via my Twitter handle, which is Zygmunt Freud, or the Twitter handle of the Individual One podcast, which is individual1pod, features a great interview with cable news veteran David Shuster. And one of the things about the David Shuster interview is that he blows the doors off of all elements of the news media, but he also gives a shout out to our investigation of both the Penn State and the Michael Jackson cases, which I found to be quite fascinating, and you might as well. So if you are so inclined, make sure you check out the Individual One podcast for that interview with David Shuster. As has been the case for the last couple of months, lots to get to, but I want to start off with our investigation into the Leaving Neverland fake documentary about Michael Jackson, because there's some interesting news that has occurred this week on that front, and most of it is quite positive. I'm not used to dealing with positive news, especially in the realm of these types of stories. But let me just review some of that. We'll get to other topics as well in this abbreviated hour of the World According to Zig podcast. But I always talk about the importance of political cover. And it's not just within politics, but it's particularly important in stories that are of a controversial or a toxic nature. And one of the problems with my investigation of the so-called Penn State Joe Paterno, Jerry Sandusky cases, we could never get any political cover. I've done nothing but take bullets, not just to my torso, but to my brain, riddled. My body is riddled with bullets because I've gotten no political cover at all. However, for many reasons, there has now been some political cover with regard to defending Michael Jackson and the Leaving Neverland allegations. I mentioned last week that the middle school that Jackson attended is voted to keep his name on the auditorium, and that's important because in the reverse, that would have taken away political cover. But whether it's a coincidence or not, a whole series of events have occurred surrounding that vote in favor of Michael Jackson. I want to start with the political cover with an event that didn't get very much attention, even on Twitter, among the enormous number of Michael Jackson fans who have been following this on an almost minute-by-minute basis. But to me, a key moment here, because this is all a string of events, this is all a domino effect, occurred a couple of weeks ago when Boy George went on Watch What Happens Live on Bravo, which is hosted by Andy Cohen. My wife watches this show religiously, and it's a pretty funny show. And Boy George was on the program. For those who don't remember, Boy George was another 80s pop music star, and Boy George happens to be flamboyantly and openly gay. Andy Cohen is also gay, and I think that's relevant here because somehow, and I'm not even sure how this happened, but the subject of Leaving Neverland came up. And Boy George, without saying it, made it very clear that he did not believe the allegations against Michael Jackson and Leaving Neverland. He said it in a very politically correct fashion and in the way that was the safest possible way that he could do it. But it was very clear that he had great suspicions about whether or not the Leaving Neverland allegations were true. And Andy Cohen did not destroy him over this.
Boy George, what did you think of the Michael Jackson documentary? Did you see it?
I did, yeah. And what I think was really interesting about that documentary is it hits you with so much information, but you're left with nothing to say that's useful. You watch it and you just go, I don't know what I could say now. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? And I think that, one of the things that isn't in any of those documentaries is the word alleged. It's just almost taken for granted that this is what happened and therefore we all should accept it. And unfortunately, he's not here to defend himself.
Did you have a friendship with him?
No, never. But I was a massive fan like most people.
Yeah.
And it's difficult. You don't want to disrespect the people that are telling their story, but also you also don't want to kind of disregard the fact that Michael Jackson isn't around to say...
Right, one way or another.
No.
Now, this was a key moment. Here you have a legitimate celebrity from the same basic era as Michael Jackson, obviously the same industry as Michael Jackson, who happens to be gay, telling another gay man, I'm not sure I'm buying this. And I, basically going with the argument of this doesn't feel like it's been proven. And Michael Jackson, of course, isn't alive anymore to defend himself. So maybe we shouldn't be, taking this so very, very seriously. Now, I've mentioned a couple times that George and Cohen are both gay. Why does that matter? Well, the part of this that no one wants to acknowledge is that the heart of the allegations is gay sex. I mean, it's man-on-man sex. Now, it is phebophilia or pedophilia, depending on the age of the accuser, but the actual act is male-on-male sex. And I have found an interesting phenomenon in both the so-called Penn State case and in this Michael Jackson situation, that gay men, now whether it's because they feel more free to talk about it and they're less politically correct, or maybe it's a combination of that freedom with regard to what they're allowed to say and not get criticized for it, as well as their own personal experiences, which are key here, I have found that gay men tend to be far more skeptical of these types of allegations. Now, there's a number of reasons why that might be, but you have to acknowledge that that's at least potentially relevant because they have experience with these actual acts. Not necessarily acts with young boys, but they understand the plausibility of this type of action occurring, especially with, by the way, and this is really the number one thing that no one ever, especially in the media, ever wants to talk about, is that we're dealing with heterosexual boys in both the Penn State case and in the Michael Jackson case. James Safechuck and Wade Robson are very heterosexual. There's no indication at all that they're gay. The number one thing with regard to the Catholic priest scandal that, again, people never want to talk about is that the vast majority of that abuse was gay priests preying on boys they perceived either were or were becoming gay. That's how they got away with it. Heterosexual boys have an exceedingly different reaction when told by a man, hey, do this, this, or this in a sexual realm. And I realize that there's a big difference between an 8-year-old boy and a 14-year-old boy. But when you're 14 and you're heterosexual, without drugs, without alcohol, without payoffs, this kind of stuff doesn't happen. It certainly doesn't happen easily. And I don't care who you are. But so it's interesting to me that Boy George was one of the first people of the celebrity ilk to be willing to say on television, hey, I'm not sure I buy this. Now, why is this relevant? Because then we have a series of domino effects. We have Harvey Levin of TMZ, who ordinarily would be somebody who would be calling bullshit on a story like this. The old Harvey Levin, in fact, did call bullshit on Wade Robson in 2013 when they covered the story for TMZ. Harvey Levin is a pretty smart guy. He's generally a cynic. He's a lawyer. But for some reason, whether it's because of Me Too or fear of being attacked or whether it's some corporate conflict of interest, Harvey Levin has been exceedingly pro Leaving Neverland and very pro even Wade Robson and James Safechuck, as if somehow over the 6 years, Wade Robson's allegations somehow got more credible. No, they got less credible because of the legal machinations involved in this and all the things that have been uncovered. So it makes no damn sense. But even Harvey Levin went on TMZ, and I was shocked to see this. Again, I was alerted by my wife. My wife watches all this crap. And whenever something she thinks I might find interesting, and she knows I'm now embroiled in the Michael Jackson Leaving Neverland saga, she says, hey, have you seen this, or what about this? And Harvey Levin said on TMZ Live this week that, look, a lot of people thought that Michael Jackson was going to be canceled or muted after Leaving Neverland, but he acknowledged, quite to my surprise, that has not happened.
I got to tell you something. And this really struck me when I heard Game, when I heard Bieber, that you look at Michael Jackson, and Leaving Neverland didn't have that mute Michael Jackson effect that a lot of people thought it would.
Right.
And, you know, R. Kelly certainly did have that effect, but people assumed it would happen with Michael, and it didn't. And I think people are kind of playing off of that now with Chris Brown.
Right. And I
you know what I mean?
And I think it was never called this. It wasn't the mute Chris Brown movement. But for a brief period, that kind of happened. But
and obviously, we're talking about Rihanna for anybody who doesn't remember.
But
then you have to also remember Chris Brown's age and as far as the level of forgiveness. When he did the situation with Rihanna, he was 19 years old, right?
Yeah, it was 11 years ago now.
It was 11 years ago.
Wow.
But it is interesting, and there's a juxtaposition in the times we live and this kind of movement now, because the Michael Jackson thing, I think, honestly, I think it surprised a lot of people.
Now, maybe he was thinking, partially because of, obviously, he's in Los Angeles, and I'm sure he knew about the fact that the middle school had voted to keep Michael Jackson's name on the auditorium. He may have seen what Boy George said on Andy Cohen's program. And then, after that, Madonna has the audacity to say that she has questions. Again, doing it much in the same way as Boy George, and it would not surprise me at all if Boy George provided the cover for Madonna. See, this is the way it works. You know, you got to have a foothold, and then one person says something and doesn't get destroyed, so then someone larger than that says, oh, I can also say the same thing and not get destroyed. So you got Boy George leads to Harvey Levin, which maybe leads to Madonna saying, look, I got questions about this. This doesn't all make sense to me.
Now, you all have always had a lot to say about these sexual abuse allegations of Michael Jackson since the release of the documentary Leaving Neverland. Now, Madonna is also weighing in.
Yeah, so Madonna is on the cover of British Vogue, and she says she isn't going to take the claims the alleged victims make at face value. She tells the magazine, I don't have a lynch mob mentality, so in my mind, people are innocent until proven guilty. I've had 1,000 accusations hurled at me that are not true, so my attitude when people tell me things about people is, can you prove it?
Yeah, now when the writer asked Madonna, what would she interpret as proof? Madonna said this, I don't know, I haven't seen the film, but I guess it would be people recounting actual events, but then of course people sometimes lie, so I always say, what's the agenda? What do people want out of this? Are there people asking for money? Is there some kind of extortion thing happening? I would take all of those things into consideration.
Chloe says, great, now I've lost respect for her. Yeah. I mean, this reminds me a little bit of the Whoopi Goldberg, Bill Cosby situation, because she was friends with him. Yeah. And she had said, too, I've had things thrown at me, so I'm not going to believe this right away. And she got so much backlash. That was a different scenario in terms of there's so many people going against Bill Cosby.
But Whoopi didn't understand the statute of limitations was her problem.
Well, she also didn't, she wanted to, she wanted proof, too.
Part of her thing was, why don't they just go to the police then? Right. That was always part of her thing, with Cosby. And then Whoopi came around.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, Madonna, is she saying something that's unpopular right now? Right now, yes, what she's saying is unpopular. But Madonna is, I don't want to paraphrase her because she just said it so eloquently, which is she just believes in due process.
Right.
And that's not going to happen because Michael Jackson's dead and he already went through trials. So you can't hate on somebody when their mandate is to allow due process to find the truth and to not weigh in on something and to not want to convict somebody. And I think that what Madonna said was solid, and a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, Alexia says, I honestly agree with Madonna. Mike says, I believe this is an honest answer. Yeah, you have to believe in due process. It's just,
you do. That's
this is a weird
There's
situation.
Nothing else.
Yeah.
And, of course, Madonna is a huge star, same era as Michael Jackson in the 80s. I mean, frankly, I don't what radio stations that do 80s music, what would they be without Madonna or Michael Jackson? What, not Phil Collins? Basically, that's all that's left. So, I mean, anyway, my point here is that Madonna being willing to raise questions about this is significant because now we have we have significant coverage for any other celebrities that are going to get asked about this in the future because Madonna hasn't been destroyed over this. And in fact, Madonna's comments led to the Fox affiliate in Washington, D.C., which is a fairly major television station in a big market. They have a talk show that I'd never even heard of before. I'm amazed that they do this, but I've now seen the clips online where universally everybody on the show, on two different versions of the show, rip Leaving Neverland to shreds as much as you could do in the politically correct universe. So
Madonna talking MJ, Marina, like it or not. You know, I think she's making a legitimate point here. I'm not like the biggest Madonna fan because sometimes she's super outlandish, but I think she is making the right questions here. Look, he was acquitted of the initial charges. Yes, there's a documentary, but even HBO's kind of backtracked and said, look, there's not a lot of weight in what these people are saying. Should they come out and make those accusations? Absolutely. I think everybody should be able to make accusations, allegations if they believe them. But at the same time, her questions are 100% legitimate. Is there proof? Can we provide anything substantial that will say that this actually took place other than those two accounts?
The whole thing that a lot of people brought up is the fact it's clearly at this point do not have him to defend himself against the allegations.
And then there's that.
Which, you look at the evidence in it, it makes you think, but...
Listen, I watched the documentary, and it was compelling television.
Yeah.
But it was a propaganda piece. It was told from one vantage point at the admission of the director. He did that intentionally. There were no checks and balances. There was nobody from the Jackson estate, no Jackson allies, and he's not here to defend himself. And if we're going to exhume all the dead pop and music icons who've either been accused of or actually done bad things in their life and mute all of their music, then we have to do Elvis, Jerry Lee Lewis, Frank Sinatra, James Brown.
Jerry Lee Lewis is still with us right now.
Is he?
He is.
Oh, well, then God bless him. I had no idea.
I think, was there any correlation between them trying to sensationalize a little bit more given how well the R. Kelly documentary did? Do you guys know about that?
It was in the works long before that.
Okay.
And then both of them have tried to sue the Jackson estate. Both of them were trying to look for jobs.
Asked that
They're
question
very
too. What do they want?
questionable characters.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. Tell your story, but if you're going to do a documentary, I think it should be a balance.
Well, and Jesse McCartney, who used to spend a lot of time there, he came out and said, this is baloney.
So did Macaulay Culkin.
Yeah, so
a lot of those younger celebrities.
You have to consider that.
That was the first time that on television in America, someone has been willing and able to go on and say, wait a minute, this feels like bullcrap. We're not going to say that. We're going to say all the polite things we need to pretend that we're not calling James Safechuck and Wade Robson liars. But the reality is that we're not going to buy Leaving Neverland. We're not going to cancel or mute or destroy Michael Jackson, the dead man who cannot defend himself. So that's all very, very positive stuff. And I've not been able to verify, I know I've seen it, so I know there's some truth to this, but I've not been able to verify the sourcing on this or why this is the case. But I have been amused by the fact that there's been a dramatic change in the way that HBO describes Leaving Neverland on their on-demand features. You can find these on Twitter or online if you search it. But here's the evolution of how HBO has described Leaving Neverland on the on-demand. You know, you go on-demand or your DVR and you click on a particular program and there's a description of the program. Leaving Neverland, HBO's fake documentary about these allegations against Michael Jackson, was originally described as the stories of James Safechuck and Wade Robson, who were abused by Michael Jackson. Clear cut, they were abused. Then it got amended to their alleged abuse. Now, whether that was out of a fear of a lawsuit or the lawsuit that's happening or whether they're trying to protect themselves or who knows why, I have no idea what the source of that is, who's making that call, how high up in the corporate ladder that call is coming from, but it's an interesting change from abused to alleged abused. But then that's nothing compared to what it says currently, because the most recent version I saw was, this is the story about how these boys spent time with Michael Jackson. So it's gone from abuse to alleged abuse to they were just spending time with Michael Jackson. Just spending time with him. I mean, that's funny. It's pathetic. And this is a serious matter, but really? Spend time with. That's what we've come down to. Yeah, I will acknowledge that James Safechuck and Wade Robson did spend some time with Michael Jackson. Why that's newsworthy, I don't know. And then one other thing I want to mention here is that there's been some movement with regard to the Michael Jackson estate. I don't want to talk too much about this because a lot of it's not for sure yet, but I got contacted not once but twice this week by different elements of the Michael Jackson estate One about an event that may or may not happen here in June that they want me to be a part of in evaluating leaving Neverland. I'm hopeful that that will occur. If it does, I'll certainly make sure that everyone is well informed of that. But that sounds very interesting and very hopeful. And then this is really potentially quite interesting, although it may not happen. I am tentatively scheduled to have lunch this week with the, I don't know how I want to describe them. I would say the two largest figures within the legal section of the Michael Jackson estate. They've asked me to come to have lunch with them, including the name of one person who most people listening to this would certainly know who this person is. So we're tentatively scheduled to have lunch this week. If in fact that happens, or even if it doesn't, I'll let you know more details in the next edition of the World According to Zig podcast. So that is very interesting. I'm not even sure why they want to have lunch. They've been very complimentary of my work, but we'll see when in fact happens if that lunch does come to fruition.
There's a big concert coming up, Quincy Jones at the O2 Arena in London. Originally, the title, it was all Michael's music, you know, and the music he made with it. But originally the title was Off the Wall, Bad, and Thriller, right? Like a journey through that. He's changed it to just, he took all references out, changed it to just the soundtrack of the 80s. And people are saying, like, you know, he shouldn't have done that. Or somebody should have.
I have a great love for Quincy Jones, and I'm just saying this to Quincy Jones. Quincy, you and Michael made history around the world. Do not change history. Keep it what it has always been and what it represents. Excellence at the highest level. That's what you and my brother achieved. Don't let anybody put in your head to change anything. It's what it is. My brother is innocent on all charges, always.
Right. Well, do you feel like, you know, it's just maybe a reaction to obviously all this stuff? Like, you think he's like optically trying to fix things?
You can't satisfy the media. You have to satisfy the people, and the people know. I'll say it again. Michael and Quincy made history around the globe. Yeah. Put it back to what it originally was. Don't let anybody change what history has done. That's what the world has evolved into, history. You can't change his history. It's what it is.
Right.